The reason I started this podcast 3 or 4 years ago was because I needed to do a couple of things. One, to talk to attorneys, vendors, people I could do business with to get business, lead generate. But two, also was to learn how to be better at my craft, how to differentiate myself from the other agents in the business I was competing with. And the way to learn is by talking to people actually doing things and share with you their experiences, their success, and what they do to be productive. A year and a half ago, I forget exactly how long ago it was, at that time, I came across a young guy who at the time was working for Philadelphia, for the court system, inside as what we call a probate attorney, different terminology that we'll talk about that. And it was nice to let me interview him on the show back then. He since has continued to grow as attorney, and today is I guess the term would be in private practice, right? That you're separate from the court system. You left that and now are a private attorney in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, or the Philadelphia area, Pennsylvania. I'll let him tell you all that. But that's why we're doing this here, is to learn how to be better at our craft. Andre Desir, thank you so much for coming back to us. Appreciate it.
Bill, it is always a pleasure to be on your show. I will always make time for you. I think you do a public service, and in the tradition of continuing my public service, I enjoy participating.
Thanks, but you left out that I'm good looking and charming, but I'll look over like that for
Okay.
So they get the path right. When I talked to you previously, you worked for the court system, but your title there was what?
I was a judicial law clerk, so I was a clerk. So I was in-house counsel for a judge, essentially, was my role.
As a layperson, when we hear the term clerk, like somebody clerk for the Supreme Court justice, they're not a clerk like in the frontline employee of an administrative office who is at the front desk with a desk and pens and such. Clerk in the legal sense normally means an attorney who's assigned to a particular judge. And in this case, you were an attorney at the time, practicing for for Philadelphia's court system and working for one particular judge or multiple judges.
So I had the distinct pleasure of working for multiple judges, and that was a unique position. Typically, clerks only are with, it's a very close relationship. You are drafting their opinions. You get the inside fastball for everyone who plays baseball, so to speak, on how the judge thinks, what they're looking for. And so you typically only work for one judge, but I had worked for two judges because one was retiring, and so they were winding down. So I just happened to, be on board and helping out both judges while I was there. And it was a fantastic experience, both for me as an attorney, but then also me interpersonally, to see how two judges are like polar opposite people and how they approach the law very differently.
And so two things we don't think about as non-attorneys is, one, that the guy or gal who's the clerk today, who's only the clerk today, or in Los Angeles, we call them probate attorneys, is perhaps tomorrow the practicing attorney, or down the road, perhaps the judge in that same court, because they've already learned the procedures, they learned the processes and such. And so really they're people you want to meet, number one. Number two, they see so many cases in a compressed period of time. In a week, they see what people see in a year. In a month, they see what a probate attorney might see in a lifetime. So describe for a little bit for us how being inside the courtroom or behind the scenes, so to speak, helped prepare you to be a private practice attorney.
Bill, you hit the nail right on the head. In that year that I had clerked, I roughly around 500 or 600 cases we disposed of. And a case can be anything from in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia specifically, the orphans court, a probate court, handles all estate wills and trust matters. It has exclusive jurisdiction. So it's the only court that can hear most of those cases. And so anything from a person passing away and them contesting or challenging a will, which is a will contest, to modifying or altering the terms of a trust, which is trust modification, we can see anything that runs the gambit in any corner of that law. And for me as an attorney, I was thrown, all types of varying matters every single day and seeing all of these different things. And I let's say I know nothing about this area of the law. I have to come up to speed very quickly.
So you covered a lot. Let me just do some quick housekeeping. This is Probate Weekly. You can register to come in live on the Zoom call and ask questions live of our guests. We do this every Thursday, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern at probateweekly.com. We do record it and put it on social media. You can see past episodes at episodes.probateweekly.com. And if you're watching on the live streams, YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn, while we're live, You can ask questions, and I check the comment box there regularly, or if it's after hours, we'll come back and get that. So a couple of things you hit on. Number one, you were just in your courtrooms that you're responsible for, you manage 500 cases a year. Now, let me ask you a question. I know the answer in LA. What does the average attorney, how many probate cases does they, if I took all the probate cases and divided by the number of attorneys, how many does the average handle in a year?
I guess that varies by jurisdiction. So Philadelphia, 2 million people, a little over 2 million people. I would say all the probate cases, maybe 2,000, 2,500 filed here. 5 judges, you are sitting judges, so you can do that math on how that kind of sort of breaks down, 500-600 a judge. That's about, just in Philadelphia County, places like New York where there's 8-9 million people, death and taxes, right? Everybody who passes away is supposed to have a probated estate, right? Whether or not there's a will or not a will, every single person who passes away, you're supposed to go and open or administer that deceased person's estate.
So a couple of things that are packed. I mean, you're such a source of information. I don't think you realize it. So us lay people. I'm interviewing a guy from the planet Krypton trying to explain to mere mortals how he can fly and how he can jump in the probate space. So number one, biggest misconception of probate is if you have a will, you avoid probate. It might be true in certain things in certain states, but generally speaking, certainly California and in most states, generally speaking, the will is probated, or the will is executed in probate court, not avoiding probate court. It just gives the rules based on the decedent's wishes rather than the law based on the state. So that's an important misconception that most customers have. You also mentioned 500 cases a month. In LA, for example, if I download the 500 cases and sort by attorneys, I get 250 different attorneys, which means the average attorney, in a year, if I take the 6,000 divided by, I'll get 3,000 attorneys, which means the average attorney does 2 cases a year. You do 500 in a month as a judicial clerk.
In a year, in the entire year. If I could do 500 a month, I would never leave. They would chain me to my desk. You know what I mean? No, it's for the year. I would say it was somewhere, but the judges dispose of on about 500 cases.
Okay, and dispose means to get rid of. They either rule on it or they deny it or whatever. Not continued. That comes to some resolution is disposition of the case, and that's what the judges are. When you go there, you realize you wonder, why are they moving so hard? Like, what are they motivated by? They track their dispositions. There's a report put out in California every year of the disposition rate, how many are disposed of, more or less than last year by court, by judge. And so that's the term they use as disposition. Okay. And he also mentioned the term orphans court. Now, again, he's in Philadelphia. Here in LA, we use a probate court. It's a little bit of a misnomer because in LA, for example, in probate court, we handle conservatorships, we handle guardianships, we handle probate. We also handle trust and trust litigation. People often say, well, if you have a trust, you avoid litigation. No, you probably will. You more likely will. But very commonly, trusts are litigated, and they're here in LA or in California, probate court. In Philadelphia, it's orphans court. It's the name they use for it. And all these types of cases are handled in what they call orphans court. But in reality, it's just the name of the division that handles multiple things. Same is true in most other states. So good information. Okay.
Yeah, and New York, just for a point of fun and for everybody's information, New York, it's called surrogates court.
So right? I was going to say surrogates court, which has all the same things. Who's a surrogate? I don't mean...
It's essentially, the concept is there's one court system in your trial system that is it's exclusive jurisdiction. It's the place where you go to handle estate matters. So in every jurisdiction, we title it funny things and different names, but the concept is that's the court that has the power to adjudicate, to deal with, or handle the estate, trust, wills matters.
And again, those watching, part of why we do this is we want to learn the terminology and know it in different areas, because when you have a customer, let's say that has a probate in LA, and they also maybe own a piece of property in Pennsylvania or Philadelphia, they may not need to have a sub escrow or sub probate. We call it in Los Angeles, different term, but it's not handled in probate court in Philadelphia. It's handled in orphans court. You say that term to the Philadelphia attorney, they're going to treat you different than you call probate court. They're going to go, what are you talking about? Or maybe they know, but they're not going to be as aware. So how did you end up of all things, as a probate clerk versus all other types of law? When people think of attorneys, you watch movies, TV, I've never seen, maybe you have, I've never seen a probate specific attorney other than one movie that I would mention. But generally speaking, it's something is criminal or it's major corporate, acquisitions, mergers. How did you end up at probate court?
So it completely on accident. So my second year of law school, I externed, meaning I worked for a judge who happened to be in Montgomery County, which is right outside of Philadelphia, their probate court system. I was enamored, and I really appreciate, like, I met this woman once and I was like, oh my God, I just want to be near her. I want to learn from her. I wanted to accept. So, and then I reached out independently and she agreed to take me on. And she just so happened to be in probate court. She's certain judges in Pennsylvania, you're elected a judge. So when you run to be a judge in Pennsylvania, you got to get on the ballot, you got to, campaign, and then you're elected, and then you're appointed. You don't run for a criminal seat judge or a civil seat judge. You just run for judge. And typically the administrative judge or the head judge or the person in charge of that court that judicial circuit would dictate or tell each judge which part they're sitting in. So you could be, once you're elected judge, you could do civil your entire life, and all of a sudden you're now sitting in orphans court. More often than not, the administrative judges try to match apples and apples and oranges and oranges. If you're, are the most famous criminal litigator in Pennsylvania and you get elected judge, chances are you'll be sitting in the criminal part. But for the average Joe who gets elected, it's a roll of the dice. So I worked with a woman I worked for a woman in orphans court, and I fell in love with the practice. It is both transactional, meaning that I sit with people and I write their will. They give me money and I give them a document. That's the transaction. And then it is also litigation. I can go to court and my client can say, this will is a product of undue influence or fraud. We want to challenge it. Then I will litigate. I will go to court and say that, Judge, I need an order from you saying X, Y, and Z. So it's one of the only areas of the law that has both of that transaction and that litigation. So, and then on top of that, here's the kicker, the fun part, it's low stakes. Another area of the law, I did a little bit of crim. My first case when I was barred was a gun possession case. And there's a lot of human misery element. There's a lot of just sadness. There's a lot of high stakes, right? If I get it wrong, someone's going to lose their freedom. In probate and orphans court, in this system, a lot of the effects and things that happen are after the fact. Money sitting in escrow, somebody's passed away, right? So if you mess something up, you can, more often than not, you can rewind it, redo it. The stakes are a little lower than if criminal court, I mess it up, someone's going to prison.
So a couple things, when you said use the word when I was first barred, that means admitted to the bar, not barred from, but it means he got into the bar, just from a terminology point of view. And also just notice how important mentorship is, particularly in law. You're always I find that very common, unlike any other industry where somebody either got into law and or a specialty because of somebody in a relationship that inspired them along the way. You hear those stories all the time from attorneys. It's just part of the business. And then the other thing I would say to go back to, you're just so full of information. You realize it. You talked about the head judge in LA County. I remember when COVID hit. And, in general, I'm not very much respectful of government officials. Just a general rule. It seems like things in LA just don't get done well between the trash and the roads and such. The judge who runs the court in LA was just a stone assassin. He was just so on his game. And again, I encourage any realtor who's serious about learning the probate business, join your local bar as an affiliate if they allow you to. Some do, most do, some don't. And if you get a chance to go online or go in person and see the head judge for the court in LA County, in our case, wow, is that an impressive guy? I don't even know what to say. Just otherworldly smart and command of, because he talked about how many different, I didn't think about all the divisions, all the courts and all the things, and understand how they move people around to try to match them up. So definitely, if you have a chance to meet or hear the head judge in your county, that guy is going to be one of the best attorneys you're ever going to hear. And definitely, if you want to learn the business, that's a guy that you want to get a chance to hear from. Andre, I would imagine that if, to use your baseball analogy, you would be like the first round draft pick coming out of the orphans court into probate as a business person. I can say that as a professional. Now, maybe you have to learn the business of getting customers to choose you or to sign up with you or pay you. That's a business thing. But from a technical point, I would think you'd be like the all-star first-round draft pick.
Yeah, but of no fault of my own, not because I am particularly skilled or a good attorney or you're going to get better results from me by happenstance, right? Because I worked for the judges. I know what they're looking for, right?
Okay, just absorb it. Okay, yeah, maybe still.
Yeah, but like in that sense, so if the chances are in Philadelphia County, there's it's usually a lottery system on who you get appointed to. But could you imagine if I'm your attorney that you hire and you go before one of the judges that I worked for, right? They're gonna, the odds are in your favor, right? Not necessarily because I'm good, but that those judges know that they've trained me, they've taught me, right? They've showed me what they're looking for, and I'm going to file and do things according to what I think they're looking for. So right. Chances are, more likely than not, the outcome is gonna be more favorable for you, right? So that is, again, of no happenstance of my skill that I'm the number one draft pick, but just by that. Law firms, especially big law firms, they like to hire clerks because number one, it's like, the shiny, they get to show it off. I got this judge's clerk, but additionally, they know their clients fare just a tad bit better. If it's 50-50, the feather goes on that scale just a little bit more if I appear before the judge I worked for.
And I think a customer who understands that experience would appreciate that and choose you versus somebody else. It's just a natural. Look, I've been in LA County Court, in front of a couple of judges a few times. And when they recognize me, and I like to think I do a good job, it's a whole different experience. The guy comes in and doesn't follow the rules, interrupts the judge, argues with the judge. Like, I've been in court where the guy argues with the judge, and I just take a couple steps away from him.
You're like, I don't know this guy. We didn't come up together.
I said hi to him on the way in, but we're just being polite here. I don't know the guy, because you don't argue. You don't. Rule 1, don't argue with a judge. Ask questions, apologize, ask permission. Please, thank you, Your Honor. Don't argue with the judge. Just rule 1 on that one. So let's talk about. If I was a real estate agent in Philadelphia, you'd be my new best friend. Where is your practice headed now? What's your plan? Where are you going to be a year from now? Where do you want to be 5 years from now?
I've actually accepted a position recently with a company called EP Wealth, which is based in actually California. Right. It's a financial advising firm. So I'm an in-house attorney now for them, advising in their estate wills and trust department. So it's a RIA, which is it's a fiduciary kind of investment advisory firm. So they don't bill or don't collect money from how they churn or they don't get money from selling stocks and bonds on behalf of customers. They get money from doing a good job. The more money they make for the clients, the more money they make for themselves. They're considered fiduciaries. So I work in-house for them on some of their estate, making sure all of the matters are kind of tied up. And this is a new job, just started it recently. So I'm excited to see what this goes.
Congratulations. Do they do professional fiduciary work? Do they act as fiduciaries in assets, real estate, and those kinds of things in the handling estates?
They do. And to everyone listening out here, one of the things that I'm learning now is how connectors are important, right? I feel they have a lot of opportunity to connect, and a lot of the clients are like looking for people, and I'm in a position because of the fiduciary and also the trusted relationship to refer them, right? And I'm going to refer the clients that I've now have a wide access to the people who are in my network that I know and that I know do good work, right? So when that client's like, oh, I need a real estate, we got to sell this property because it's messing up our trust or all these other reasons, I'm like, oh, yep, I got a guy. I know a guy, and it's because I've maintained a good relationship. I know that I can put my reputation in their hands because they're going to value my customer and do right by them. So in this position, unlike my other one, I see the value in networks and having people that you work with. It's so very important.
Now, the company you work for, you mentioned, is based in California, though I think you do business in other states. You're in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania. How important is a specialist in particular counties within the state? Meaning, I'm an attorney in Pennsylvania, but I'm in Harrisburg or I'm in Pittsburgh. How different is that if you're giving somebody to do work, whether it be maybe not full-on litigation, but contesting, objection, and such in orphans court?
So when you think about your attorneys and the rules that they're bound by, there's the rule of professional conduct, right? So like my rules of ethics, I have to, if one of the ones that everybody knows, if they make a offer to my client, I have to verbally tell my client about that offer. I can't decide that it's a bad offer. I'm just not going to tell my client. That's one of the big rules of ethics, but there's a whole list of them that we're under. Then there's the Pennsylvania rules of civil procedure, right? So these are the rules of how all cases should be handled. Then there are the local rules, right? Which are jurisdiction or county dependent. Each local rule is different. different. So there's some counties in Pennsylvania, no e-filing, no online filing. You want to probate a will, you got to walk into that office and physically hand them that document. Philadelphia is one of the counties that has e-filing. I want to probate a will in Philadelphia. I can file it online. I never have to leave my house, right? And just right then, I've shown you a difference in a local rule that affects a practice. I don't got to get in my car. I don't got to drive. I don't got to put gas in, so on and so forth, right? So local rules are just one of the 4 or 5 different rules that attorneys have to like make sure we fit that square hole into the round peg.
Yeah, and I think that's also true in California. We have probate code for the state of California, and then each county has its own rules. And in LA County, you have to e-file unless you're the petitioner, right? They make an exception for individual people. If you're an attorney or a service, you have to e-file only. They won't take it otherwise. And like I say, other counties don't even e-file. You come in. But those same other counties, when you get your order, when you get the judge approves your order, you hand them the form and they sign it right there. And in LA, like it's like a week to get the order signed. So they're all different. And I think it's important. So in your practice now, are you looking to meet attorneys in different counties as well in the states that you work in? Because you used to only work in Philadelphia. Now I imagine you occasionally got to find somebody in Pittsburgh or something, right?
Well, I'm the resident Pennsylvania expert, right? While I do work with clients in other states, and I do have to I am like in-house counsel advising from that perspective, and also there we have a vast network, and all of my I'm not the first one at this, so to speak, but yes, I am developing relationships with people across America because our clients are across America.
Well, so in the course of your business, I don't know as much about Orphans Court in Philadelphia, but in LA, about 10% of cases need, if they're selling real estate, court confirmations, a process where certain papers are filed with the court, judge has to review them. Is there such a process like that in Philadelphia where some minority cases or contested cases need to be approved by the court? And is there an overbidding, or what does that look like?
So it's about liability, right? And also about paying taxes. It's always about paying taxes. You have not in Pennsylvania, the estate taxes do, and California doesn't have one, just for everyone listening, they do not charge an inheritance or estate tax. Pennsylvania does. It's one of the last 5 jurisdictions in America that still charges what's called an inheritance tax. If you leave money to someone, they have to pay tax on the money that they receive. In California, that's not the case. There's no estate tax in California. And in Pennsylvania, you have 9 months until the decedent, after this person died, to file their inheritance tax return. And that is one of those like hard and fast. After 9 months, you start accruing free fees, and all these other things start happening. If you probated a will 9 months after that, the death certificate's issued. If there's no inheritance tax filed, the Department of Revenue in Pennsylvania starts, looking and seeing what's going on. And one of the things the court or judge will do is acknowledge that, remove your liability for some of those fees and other things.
Is there cases where when they want to sell property, they need the judge to approve that?
Yeah. Yes. If in contested matters, unequivocally. Also bond. Occasionally, if somebody passes away without a will and you become an administrator in Pennsylvania, there is a decision to be made by the Register of Wills whether or not they're going to require a bond on your administration. And if they require a bond on your administration, then you need approval to sell property. And it's all about how risky. Like if they have a $10 million estate, if you file the inventory as $10 million, they're going to ask for a bond of a couple $1 million. There's no will, we're not going to just let you do things, and there's not going to be anybody accountable. So that, somebody has to make that decision, and it's a substantive decision case by case.
An individual administrator, executor who doesn't have the capacity to get a bond, maybe they have, dad dies and the child has bad credit or whatever, financial problems. Does that property then go to sale and the court has to approve it? Is there a formal process for that, or how does that happen?
You can petition the court and extraordinary circumstances. You can request relief based on, like you said, look, I got the situation, the register is requiring a $2 million bond, I don't got it, but there's a property, there's all these other things, and then it'd be a court overseeing administration. So the court will oversee the administration. Okay, we understand you can't post a bond. We will, 3 months later is the next court date, come back and we'll see what you have done so far, right? Like you have to get released for the judge would give you permission to administer to the state without the bond, and in exchange for that you have to then come back to the court date. You have to participate in their overseeing process.
And can you describe the overseeing process? What does that look like? In California, we really, the only thing you do is when you want to sell property, you have to publish. Once you publish the sale, then you accept an offer, then you file with the court to have the court approve that sale, and then come to court, and other people can overbid if they think that it's being sold too low. It's an overbid process. Do you have something similar to that in Philadelphia?
Yeah, in order for for a petition for the approval, a sale of real estate, you have to have two independent appraisals or affidavits of value for that, like, saying that this house is worth this much. So they're real estate professionals, people with licenses who are in the industry will sign a statement saying that I personally am aware or know this property, and I can attest that, the $300,000 it's selling for is market, or what, reasonable for what you would get in the area for this price. So then you would file that petition. A judge would go through it to, look at what you filed, make sure it all makes sense, and then either approve or delay or deny the request.
Well, very different, very extreme. Like California, we have a very cumbersome process for those. It's a whole different thing. So in the course of your business, do you come across real estate investors and real estate agents who are involved in matters in the orphans court? And how would you describe the ones that are effective and most professional that you might encourage people to learn from? What would you say are common characteristics of those people?
Documentation, right? People who document are very good. Record keeping it's lights out, right? Everything that you do, you should document it. You can't have too much information, right? You can have too little information, but you can't have too much information. What I mean by that is, if you're going to change the locks on the property, if you're going to get the locks changed, right? Document who the locksmith company was, the time they came, the time they did the right. It was X, Y, and Z locksmith came. They came February 28th. You're right. It cost $76, right? Joe Locksmith was the person who did it, right? That is, the really good ones, the good real estate agents, the people who participate in this process are the ones who keep meticulous notes and records and provide evidence when the people who need it can readily access it. If I'm as an attorney handling a case and I want to get a petition to approve the sale of real estate, and I'm jamming in all of this information, the judge on the other side sees that I've operated in good faith. I've tried to act in good faith, and I think those behaviors and actions go a long way when you can document and show that. I've hired cleaners, and I even called or consulted with 3-4 of them to make sure I was getting the best price, that I wasn't spending somebody else's money frivolously. Those are the individuals I think that excel and other attorneys seek out and try to partner with, because they know they're going to get a good service from them.
And I think that something I learned, my father was an attorney, and I used to clerk when I was in high school and college, kind of part-time for them. And what I learned was that attorneys check out other attorneys' filings to learn, because it's public, right? You file something, it's not copywritten, it's the opposite, it's public information. And so if somebody has a practice of listing off 10 or 20 things, so when I started in probate real estate, I would watch the filings and see what the best attorneys were doing and say, oh, wow, they made notes of all the things they did on the property. They had a checklist. Well, I have all that in my system. I can just print out that report and attach it. And I think, when a judge sees that you're meticulous and that you are conscientious, they're going to kind of look for something else. And I can tell you, I'm sure tell me this is your experience. When the judge discovers one thing done wrong, they pull out their pencil, sharpen it, and look for something else, because they figure if you did that wrong, if you're a little sloppy there's probably something else here that I'm missing I need to pay attention to.
You are absolutely correct. And that was another thing I learned very on in my career. And I would recommend you, if pay special attention to the first couple pages of anything that you file or do. Those, right? Make sure those are pristine, because then you get the benefit of the doubt later on, right? If I'm reading something and in the first page there's a typo, like you said, I'm putting my glasses on, I'm strapping in because there's gonna, I know that this was sloppily done, right? And it's not to say that we all don't make errors or mistakes, but one of the things that really good lawyers do is that our mistakes come at the end after you've read 10 pages of pristine stuff.
It's funny you say, I had a disagreement with a paralegal the other day in California. We have a form called a notice of proposed action. So on a full authority, when you want to sell the property, you have to give notice to anybody who gets noticed that, and I did a video on this on my YouTube channel today, if you're interested, you have to put on there, we sold the property for this amount to this party. These are the terms, the basic issues. So the form has a box where you could type in 3 or 4 lines of information. But I noticed the best attorneys always put see attached and have it say attachment A or attachment paragraph A, and they attach a lot of information. But on the front page, all you see is see attachment A. It just looks neat, clean, concise. To your point, just to start getting into the detail, I have to go to page 3 or 4. I'm less likely to tear it apart. Versus if I'm page 1, I have a 4-paragraph line and there's one typo. Well, now what else? Like you say, what else is wrong? So I would agree from a style point of view, and that's just human nature. That was what I noticed in judges, that put stuff at the end as much as you can, put a C attachment and attach it, and it just looks a little more official than putting it all, trying to squeeze the stuff in the form even when you're able to. Yeah. So now nowadays in your current business, you're I guess more clearly focused on the avoiding probate through estate planning part than you are on the probate. We didn't plan. Now we go to court kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting position to be in, because having spent so much time in the court, I love probate, right? Like I feel like, and the rest of America and the world is like, everybody's like, probate's the worst. We got to avoid this, and I'm like, no, probate is great, right? Like I just view it differently, and I get that a lot of people, it's a tough time. Someone's passed away. It's a lot of papers and filings, right? But from my perspective, you get to kind of dive into somebody's life, right? A little bit. You get to see how your loved one or the person that you're handling with, how they lived, what they did. You get to look through their files, right? And not just like doing it, surreptitiously, but you get to do it with court approval and as the appointed administrator, it's your duty to, marshal the assets and to administer their estate. And I would be proud to administer my parents' estate, right? To settle and wind down their affairs. So it's just an interesting, but you are right though. I and a lot of other attorneys are advocating a lot of these processes to avoid probate by any means necessary, or limit the impact that probate has. Because I know in California, there's something called the Hegstead petition, which is kind of like it's a de minimis estate. There's not a lot going on. We could wrap this up with a tiny little bow in one little court order. It ends the entire administration of a decedent's estate.
Well, not to argue, but I believe a Hegstead specifically it should have been in the trust. It was the intention to be in the trust, but it was left out. Yeah, it's a little more than a limited estate. It's that one question: can we treat it as though it was in the estate or not? And then if you can, now the trust documents are in effect, and if not, and this is so common for everybody on the call, every real estate agent. It's so common. I have a lead right now I'm working on where I sent the documents to the attorney, and he kind of freaked out when I showed it to him, because this person set up a very expensive trust. They had a very expensive trust attorney who did all kinds of documents and minimal other trusts and different family members, but she refinanced her house and she deeded out of the trust. And then she deeded it back in, but it wasn't insured, meaning the challenge of that we deed out is you deed it back in. Well, now the title company is going to say, well, that's nice, and you deeded it, but how do we know that deed is legitimate? We want to take a look at those documents and go into detail. And so it's one of those things where I always say, you can deed whatever you want. It doesn't mean the title company is going to accept it, and it doesn't mean they're going to insure it. You might go to court and get a judge to say you're right. But who wants to go to court and have a judge say you're right when you have a document? If you just did it properly, then you would not have that question. So definitely deeding property in and out, giving the customer the reminder to get them deeded in the property to avoid the Hegstead petition, particularly in real estate, is something that we should all, as real estate agents, be very familiar with, particularly California. California gives you a free pass, kind of like if you forgot to put it back, the Hegstead petition is, oh, we forgot, can we put it back in? Most states don't allow that. Do you have something similar in Pennsylvania? No, I haven't heard of any state that allows it other than California.
So there's the Declaratory Judgments Act. So judges have wide ability to do things, like they can, their authority is extensive and expansive, right? So I worked for probate court, and we put people in prison, like, for contempt of court, warrants were issued, people were put in prison on the judge's order, right? Like a completely different area than criminal law, but because they were in contempt of court and they that is a crime, they were imprisoned, right? And I only bring that to say that the judges could reform trust. They can put things in trust, put things out of trust, but how you had a case that determined the ability to do that. The Hegstead case was the case that allowed that to do that. Our jurisprudence or our law hasn't developed that kind of system that came out of a case. There was a case that created this avenue and this thing that you can now do. Whereas in here in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia, you would have to, it's like a one-off. You would come and ask the judge to use their discretion and their broad powers to do the thing that you want them to do.
Right. And I think the thing I try to tell people is a judge can pretty much do whatever they want. That doesn't mean they won't get it returned. Doesn't mean that you can't appeal and win or force him to change his mind. But 99% of the time, the judge can pretty much do. People say, well, will the judge approve this? I don't know.
So we're going to find out together.
Exactly. And I was going to say, is that your experience? There must have been times that you're in court or hear decisions, like you don't know which way it's going to go either. Like you see, routinely he allows it and the next day he doesn't, or she routinely doesn't allow that and all of a sudden I mean, what's up with that? They're human beings, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And even as a practicing attorney, multiple times, like I would spend hours on something. I'm like, I know I got this right. I'm 100% like and then there's something that I overlooked or misthought, and like, yep, it was wrong. Or in the other way, sometimes I'll file something I had no faith that I was gonna like. It's like this is a toss up. It go either way, and then it goes in my favor, and I'm like, okay, well, yep, there it was. We all serve at the mercy, and there is no that it's a fool's errand trying to assume you know what the judge's going to do.
Yeah. And I think for real estate investors and real estate agents like me, when people go to court for hearings to get approval, you cannot assume it's going to be approved. You just don't know until it's done. And that's why it's so dramatic. That's why it's so powerful. It's why I love this game, because I want all the odds in my favor to get my customers' documents approved or pleadings approved. Because if the judge goes, well, I don't like this, let's come back in 60 days, 90 days, like 90 days till you get the property, the buyer is going to walk, and who knows what happens to interest rates. And COVID happened that way, where I had a bunch of pending escrows and COVID shows up. So if you were continued in that time period, it cost you a lot of money, depending on who you were. Deals canceled, people lost money and such. So what would your advice be for a real estate agent who wanted to find a way to, not you personally, but talk about the Andres of the world, want to get relationships where they can get involved in the business of selling the real estate on behalf of their clients? What business advice would you give them to earn the way to get that business?
So the networking component is interesting, but like you got to be creative with the networking. One of the things that we do here in Pennsylvania is tax auctions for a lot of these estates. Their properties are sold at tax sales, and going to those, and there's a lot of attorneys at those tax sales, right? Going to those sales and seeing the process, learning how it works, participating and being knowledgeable about it. Offering to help out attorneys with, like, if you're at that tax sale and you see an attorney's having a hard time with this matter, he doesn't quite get it or doesn't know it, offering your services. Oh, we can list the property for you. So being available, networking, those are some of the things that I can't really. It's tough. I don't like networking is the big one. You have to find those relationships, and you have to be creative about the ways that you find and make those relationships.
And since you tax sales, literally last week ago today, I was at the LA County Real Estate Investors Association, and one of the best probate attorneys, in my opinion, in LA was there, not as an attorney. He was there because a speaker was going to talk about tax sales, and he wanted to learn more, and he had started in that, was dabbling in it, and separate from his practice, kind of as investing money, wanted to use his legal skills in learn tax sales. And turned out I knew the guy that was the speaker. I knew somebody else he was working with. I have a friend who's in the same group with him. So that's a great way to network. In Philadelphia, how would somebody network with attorneys in the probate or the orphans court? Bar association events or the fiduciary associations? What are the best ways to meet people there?
There's something called the Estate Planning Council. It's national. So the Estate Planning Council is you can join and be a member of that. They have events that I would recommend that people go to. It's one of the, I think good everybody there is for the same reason, the same purpose. They're all estate planning individual. So they have a national group called the Council, and every annually or biannually, there's a giant event held down in Florida. So that would be one of my recommendations is joining your, like, this is estate planning council, your state's version of that.
So they have that here in LA, and I know they also have it in Long Beach in particular. And then you mentioned, I think it was Orlando, it was just a couple of months ago that they have, I think in May or April of a year, big event, National Estate Planning Council. And I know a lot of the national vendors go there as well. So good. Okay, good. Hey, other questions? If you're watching online, we have the streamed on YouTube, Facebook. Feel free to put questions in the chat, and I'll get to them for you as well. And if, of course, you're watching the Zoom, raise your hand, put a question in the chat box. I'll call you in. I enjoy my time with Andre, so I'm sorry I kind of got a little caught up here. Do you recommend any particular book to read for investors or real estate agents? Are you involved? Do you do any real estate investing yourself?
No, but I have been to a couple closings, participated in some of the review process, making sure chain of title is one of the, learning title is an invaluable skill, because so often, more than not, people overlook making sure the chain of title and title is correct. Deeds are public information. You can go down to your recorder of deeds office, pay a couple dollars, and start and looking back into how property was titled and making sure it was titled correctly, because there are tangled title in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia specifically. It's one of the biggest and hardest issues is tangled title, and getting people to untangle those titles. It's an invaluable skill, and I don't know any book particularly that can teach you it, but I would devote a lot of time in that particular area, because if you can become skilled at learning to identify issues with title and can save people the headache of going to getting ready to close, and all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, there's an issue with this title. It was deeded to this person, but there's a missing deed somewhere in the middle. If you could be that person that saves everyone time, energy, and effort because you know title, you'll be a hero.
So a couple of tips. I'm always looking. I do have a title representative I work with. I've changed companies here recently, and if you're a title rep, I'd love to talk to you about that. But one thing I know is as soon as I get a listing, I order the prelim right away and take a look at it, because oftentimes there's a missing deed, and you want to get started on that earlier rather than later, or get the court to address it earlier rather than later. So I always tell people your title problem. Your title is a problem, probate's a solution. So if you have an issue, bring it to me and I'll try to help you solve the problem.
Also, here's another thing too. This is another one of those like tidbits or things that people really understanding the difference between legal title and equitable title. Legal title is the perfection of recording a deed, having legal title to the property. So if someone passed away and they left the property to someone else by will 30 years ago, and that person that passed away still is the legal title owner, but the person they left it to is the equitable owner, meaning the person who owns it in equity. So really understanding that there's a difference between owning something in equity, meaning that I have a right to this thing, versus I have perfected my legal title to the thing. If you can really separate those two things in your head, it will make moving and understanding the real estate aspect, you pay dividends if you can really understand those two concepts.
I have a case right now, a listing where mom and dad had a child from another marriage, and intended, apparently, or at least said verbally, he wanted to disinherit her and wanted everything to go to the daughter from his second marriage, but he never put that in writing. Yeah, so even though he passes away, and then later the mother passed away, but I guess when he passes away at that moment, his heir, in California at least, half that goes to the daughter from the prior marriage. And so even though the mother had a will and she wanted everything to go, she didn't. And you might have said, well, she's the wife, she inherits. Well, not in California, the way the law is set up. And had she right away, perhaps had a trust, had him write a will, had probated it, took the full title, then she would be able to do what she wants with it. But as a result, half of it goes to the other daughter, and it just creates strife and legal fees, and unfortunately doesn't work out for anybody's benefit. I don't think you do currently probate administration. Your current job, you're doing more legal
in-house counsel stuff. I'm in-house counsel.
In-house counsel. So, and I know you've done some private practice. Are you done with that, or is it tabled for now? Or
I mean, it's never tabled. Like, you know what I mean? Just the other day, I did a will clinic, Will for Heroes clinic the other day for Philadelphia VIP. It's a nonprofit thing. So just the other day, I was sitting down writing wills for people for free, right? You know, it's never done.
What are things that a more common probate attorney does, or maybe you do, that somebody outside can assist you with? So, for example, as a real estate agent, I'll go to attorney and say, listen, you have a estate, you have a car you need to sell, I can help you with the junking of the cars. You have junk out services, cleaning services, antiques. What are some of the things that most commonly you come across or seen come across?
In the administration process, the junking out is a big one, right? The cleaning out of properties are a big one that, you know, I charge $250, $300 an hour. If I'm doing administration, right? Me showing up to clean out a property, it's going to cost $1,000, $2,000 for 3 hours to clean out a property, to make sure that it is prepared for to be listed for sale, that the house can be appraised, because there's not a whole bunch of junk stopping the appraiser from getting to interesting or necessary components in the house.
Right.
So that is right. Having the attorney participate and do that is not cost effective, right? Having a real estate agent, having someone else participate that I can hire, you know, at a more cost effective rate to effectuate the junk out of properties. Also parking and having, sometimes cars need to be put places, right? You know, there's garages and you can pay those fees, but, you know, having access or knowing those connections and networks to house things is also a very important administrative task that I frequently find myself Googling, you know, where's the best like storage unit for this, you know, in this area, so to speak. So that is another thing I find for from an administrative area task point. Appraising items, right? So connecting, if you ever have jewelry or artwork or specific items, and knowing that having connections and connectors to people who can value items for you, you know, rather than trying to figure it out yourself. A lot of this is like DIY, do it yourself. I gotta, you know, when doing administration, I have to make sure that I'm getting full value for the beneficiaries, and that can be if I have no idea about paintings, right? Like, I'm not an art expert. I don't know that this painting is worth $5,000. So if I try to sell it at a garage sale for $50, I'm doing my clients a disservice. So, you know, growing your network, making sure you have a vast array of individuals with different skill sets around you.
Do you ever get involved in errors research? At some point in California, you have to make a good faith effort to look for errors. We didn't find any others. It's certainly more complicated cases. Do you ever get involved with vendors that do error research? Is that a service that you're involved with?
So in Pennsylvania, you have to do a good faith investigation as well. And ours is, you know, do a good faith investigation. So private investigators are a report from a licensed private investigator goes a long way in the Pennsylvania court system, right? So making sure you know some PIs, right? Like, or if you are a PI, right, connecting with attorneys that do probate would be a good idea, because, you know, occasionally we're like you said, an error search needs to be done, or we need to demonstrate a good faith effort, which isn't just a Google LexisNexis search, right? I have to hire a private investigator to do their thing, right? You know, so yes, I do get involved with it, and knowing a good, like, I know one really good private investigator, expensive, but like if it's a big enough case and I know I need to track somebody down, I'm hiring them. They're getting my money.
Right. I know in some jurisdictions, they do require like 1 or 2 websites that you check. They call that good faith. Others, you know, it's the discretion of the judge. You write out what you did, and the judge looks at that and says, sounds reasonable or not reasonable. And again, that gets down to your personal relationship. Have you ever used a service where they charge a contingency fee to find errors?
I have not. I didn't even know that was a thing. Like, if they don't find anybody, you get your money back?
You don't put up any money at all. Like they'll sign up the error and charge them 15, 20%. And they'll call you up and say, hey, we have this estate that you may not be aware of. It turns out you might be in error in the neighborhood of $50,000 to $100,000. If you're interested, we can put it together for it. We charge whatever the percentage is, and then they file they get a document to get a percentage of that estate. So that's the thing. You can pay people upfront.
Bill, you're teaching me something. I love the reciprocal nature of this relationship, because I'm learning something new now.
Well, as different markets are different, I notice, and some attorneys think that's predatory, 15, 20% sounds like a lot. On the other hand, if you called me and told me that I have $1 million, coming from some long loss that I was aware of, fine, take 20%. Thank you. I'll pay 25%. I pay referral fees 25% in real estate. So 20% fee for me would be well worth it. So it's just different.
Yeah. Again, one of the things that hamstrings attorneys is that one of the rules, our ethical rules, is we have to charge what's considered a reasonable attorney's fees. And and especially in the probate world, that differs, right? So in administration, one of the windfalls people think that attorneys get is if they can get a percentage of the estate that they administer. So like, for instance, I love using this example. The prince passed away intestate, right? He died without a will. Somebody inherit some, went in, I think it was Minnesota, was the jurisdiction that had control, that appointed a conservator or somebody to manage his estate. 120 people filed petitions saying they were related to Prince, and were looking for part of that estate, and they had their hand out, so to speak, and that person out. It's hard to do. It's not easy.
Yeah,
to determine who's who.
There's a lot of those famous cases. Howard Hughes is another famous case where you had hundreds of people he didn't have any children, didn't have any, I don't think, siblings that had children. And so you had hundreds of cousins and second cousins and third cousins. And, in old times, I don't think the records were as clear as they are today. And so figuring out who's legitimate, who's not legitimate, and then taking the assets and dividing up 300 ways. And then people complain, you sold that one too cheap, that one more. It just takes a few attorneys in that list to object to things. The whole thing becomes very unruly.
But that conservator, that one of the you could have charged a percentage of the estate as your reasonable attorney's fee. Right. But again, if you're in that Prince situation where you have 130 applications, you got to try to figure out, maybe he earned his keep, so to speak, right? Like if he did charge that percentage, think about the amount of work that went into that. Like if a small law firm would have to handle that one case by itself, right? But think about that on that scale. But that is something I learned early on. Another thing that attracted me into this area of the law, you can charge all you need is one, right? I could get one estate, charge 2% of a $10 million estate, $200,000. That's my whole year.
The California, we have a statutory limit on the fees. You can charge less, but you can't charge more than for the standard administration as an attorney, and to be the administrator or fiduciary. Those are capped. Now, there's extraordinary fees and costs that you can add on to, but you have to document them. You need the judge to approve them. And man, I've seen judges and attorneys go after each other, and it's like approved $3,216.18. Like it's tough. You really don't want to have to go to a judge and ask for money. I don't think it's becoming. I don't think that's really where you want to be. And Jack talks about Jack Roby, who had to sell. He was the owner of the Miami Dolphins, and famously he died intestate in Florida. Family had to sell the team. Very common that people have to sell large assets, companies, farms, pro sports teams. In California, we had the O'Malley family sell the Dodgers because, if you have multiple heirs, there's no way to give them all a piece of the Dodgers and run the organization. So they had to sell it and cash it out to cash people out. So another good reason to set up proper estate planning, so you can find ways with insurance and such to manage those affairs. Are you involved in this setup? Are you more now in your current job? I think the company is EP Wealth.
Yeah.
Let's get a plug in for them. So in your current job, are the customers coming to you already with a plan, or are you referring them to a plan, or are you actually preparing plans for people?
We do not provide legal services. They go out for, we don't charge. It's not a law firm. It is a investment, kind of administration. It's RIA. It does not, we aren't a law firm in that component. So I'm not like doing it as my day job, drafting, I'm not a drafting attorney.
But I'm sure you have along the way, they have a client who wants to deposit money with them and invest money with them, and they bring you the trust documents. Somebody might look at them and say, it might be time to rewrite something, or how does that work?
Something to that effect. Yeah.
So you need a Rolodex of estate planning attorneys, I would think. Good ones.
Yes.
Good one, really good ones.
Yeah. But from my time in Orphans Court in Pennsylvania, I got the cut of a lot of people here's jib, so to speak. Like I've seen The bar is really actually kind of small. Typically the estate bars are pretty small. They're not, like you said, the amount of practitioners, 250, it's not a lot of attorneys, right? They tend to all know each other. It's a very insular group, and breaking in, that could be hard, but it's not, it's a known quantity. The people who work in this field are known quantities, I think.
Well, okay. So, no, Jack, you're not locked off. I turned for security. I turned the video off. You can start your video now if you need to. Jack Lapidus is one of our favorite attorneys. And I had turned off the video because we had a little problem with somebody there, but security saying we turn back on. But we're going to wrap up here. Andre, this is our second time on the show, and I've also interviewed you offline as well. I just find you just incredible fountain of information. I really appreciate your time. I wish you the best of luck. You're currently in-house counsel for EP Wealth, which is a wealth management company based in California, national. If somebody wanted to get in touch with your firm about bringing you millions of dollars to invest on behalf of,
I'm here as an individual, right? Like I came, this is because of my love of probate, from me enjoying in our conversations. It's not for the plug or for the business. It's not saying that's not great and that you can't choose to go there, but I think you provide a service to the public. And that is why I want to participate, because one of the mandates and things that we have to do as attorneys is educate the public, try to be good servants and make sure people are informed. That is, informed consent is one of our big things. So I participate and spend my time freely with you because I think you provide a service to the public. And that's why I do this with you. Well,
I really appreciate it. I just learned so much. And again, for everybody listening, you may not ever practice in real estate or invest in state of Pennsylvania or Philadelphia more particularly, but I think the principles are the same. You can see his passion for it. I think that's common amongst the best practitioners. You can see the value of repetition and experience. And while he's, I think, self-deprecating that he's not special, he's very special, but his experience, even if you were not smart, the experience of being in the court, seeing these things over and over again, and having the personal relationship with the judges. And that's why I tell everybody in this area, learn your local county, go to court. When you have the opportunity to get in front of a judge, learn the right way to do it. Go in front of the judge, learn how they operate, learn how the attorneys work with them. I just think it's very valuable if you want to be a professional in this business. So I encourage you. Andre, thank you so much for your support. I appreciate you so much. Continued success. And we'll have you back next year. We'll get your latest update, hopefully, on your career and more importantly, updates you have for us on being better in our practice. So thank you so much.
All right, Bill, you have a lovely day.
And for the rest of you, again, thank you for joining us in Probate Weekly. We do this every Thursday, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. You can register, come in live on the Zoom call, usually if people want to participate. This was a little different topic than we normally do, but I thought it was, I learned a ton. Hope you did too. If you want to see past episodes, you go to episodes.probateweekly.com, and that takes you to my YouTube channel and past episodes. If you want to reach out to me personally, I'm at Bill Gross EXP in social media. Call, text, or email me. We also have a Facebook group for anybody who comes on this program, is interested in continuing the conversation. Go to Facebook. We have a group called Probate Weekly. Let me see if I can share the screen here. We have over 2,700, last I checked, 2,700 members in the group. And we post content, ask questions, look for referrals. Love to have you participate there and see you regularly here. If you like this, please like it, subscribe, come back again. If I can help you, thank you so much. Make today your best day ever. Thank you, everybody.